Successfully sharing. Okay. So this is the invitation to change approach. So the Center for Motivation and Change, we've got a couple of different businesses. So we have the outpatient program in New York, which we started almost 20 years ago. We have a residential program in the Berkshires, which we started about 8 years ago. And both of those have really been grounded in using evidence-based treatment strategies from our inception to help people with substance use problems. We were trained in craft about 20 years ago and struggled pretty mightily for years trying to help Bob Myers get craft further out into the world. Craft is a really, really effective evidence-based strategy for family members who are wanting to help a loved one get into treatment. And people just didn't know about it. The treatment industry didn't pick it up for a whole complicated host of reasons. So we wrote a book, Beyond Addiction, How Science and Kindness Help People Change. That was our first attempt to get craft further out into the world. And then about 7 years ago, we started we're working with the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids to train parents to support other parents using craft. And Catherine is one of those coaches, and had a lot of success in that. But one of the things that we realized in trying to train family members in craft was that there's really some complicated things that come out of our culture and how our culture thinks about addiction, and that really impacts family members and their ability and willingness to pick up some of the ideas in craft. So we started to develop the Invitation to Change approach, which is craft with a lot more strategies in it that we feel like are really helpful for parents and significant others. So my goal today is to just kind of tell you about the model. And like I said, we can talk later about specific questions. So the Foundation for Change is a nonprofit, and its sole mission is to get evidence-based hands into people in different communities. And I think there's a lot of treatment providers on this call today, but I think there's also some family members, and there are different communities. And one of the things that we know from research is that there are an enormous number of people who are never going to seek professional treatment. They're never going to walk into a therapist office. They're never going to walk into a drug and alcohol program. So we have to figure out, how do we access them and how do we access their community? And one of the most motivated cohorts are the family members of the people struggling, right? If your loved one is struggling with a substance use, you are very motivated for them to get help. You're likely struggling and suffering yourself. So it's the family members that we're trying to target, because I have the strong belief if we can help family members, we could significantly impact the number of people who ever end up having substance use problems. So I skipped a bunch of slides about how many people have substance use problems, and I'm jumping right to the number of people who don't get help. So the people on this slide are people who actually meet criteria for a substance use disorder and are not in treatment. So those are pretty high numbers. And if you look at the young adult numbers there in particular, it's almost 93%. So a lot of young adults are struggling with substance use problems and they are not in treatment. And I promise you their family members and parents are concerned about them. And I'm just going to say, I'm not looking at the chat through this. So go ahead and put your questions in the chat and we'll go back and I'll try to answer them. I'm just going to try to be so efficient here. I've got to manage my own attentional issues and kind of just plow through here. So we've got a lot of people with substance use problems, and for every person with a substance use problem, studies suggest that between 1 and 5 of their loved ones are also struggling. And some of you professionally and maybe even personally know those consequences. They're struggling financially. There's relationship conflict, there's stress, there's depression, just overall stress. And these family members, so the treatment world, I think, has started to change for the person with the problem. So substance use services are changing and lots more evidence-based options are coming into play. Family members are still kind of out in the cold. And so we know that substance use problems are a stigmatized problem families are also incredibly stigmatized and shamed, and they really, really go underground and have a difficult time asking for help, and they desperately need it. So that's what the invitation to change is all about. And these are some of the things that family members are told, right? So if you happen to have someone you care about with a substance use problem, you've likely heard some of these things from well-meaning treatment providers. Some treatment providers on this call might have even said some of these things. It's not like these things are horrible things to have said to somebody. They're just complicated, often misunderstood things to say. And it really does contribute to family members pulling away and often not engaging as much as they could and would likely benefit from. And they get all these messaging about their participation. And I cut out a lot of slides. There's a lot of research, and I'm happy to share an article we wrote about the impact of shame and stigma on family members. The impact of these messages on parents in particular is profound in terms of how it makes them feel about themselves, about their relationship with their child, and whether or not they can help. So this is really what we're trying to target. So I'm going to show a little quick video here. It's about 3 minutes. And what I ask people to do is to just, some of you on this call have seen this video a couple of times, so I always think it's impactful. I just want you to kind of notice in yourself what you feel like physically, emotionally, just how the first part of the video makes you feel and the second part of the video. And just notice that. And again, these are all words that we've all used, we've all said, and the point of this video is to just notice the impact, and especially notice the impact on a lay person. Imagine on a lay person who knows nothing about treatment options.
Carrie, you may want to unmute yourself so we can hear the video.
I just shut the video off, didn't I? Sorry about that. I'm not sure how to get back to the video.
Carrie, if you'd like me to share it, I can share it on my screen. Will you pull up the rest of the slides afterwards?
Oh, you're not shared right now? Oh, sorry, hang on a minute. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay.
Sound is working now.
There's no sound again.
That's okay. It's just music.
Okay.
So that was a failed sharing of video on my part. But if people are comfortable, just put in the chat what the 2 sets of words kind of made you feel, if you're comfortable doing that. Because, hang on a minute, how do we see the chat? Shame versus hope, hopeless versus helpful, isolating versus engaging, yeah. Disempowered, yeah. So yeah, there was just music to listen to there, because the really point of that video is that our words really matter, and we use a lot of them in really problematic ways when it comes to talking about substance use. So the invitation to change is our attempt to put a lot of evidence-based strategies into a very layperson-friendly, easily relatable, no jargoning words, helping model that we can train lay people up. So parents, first responders, really want to help the faith-based community be able to offer their communities, faith-based leaders offer their communities support. So we're going after a lot of people here with this model of how can you help a loved one support the person that they care about who has a substance use problem. And the science and kindness piece of this is that we've taken all the parts of community reinforcement and family training. And again, I'm not going to review all the profoundly effective results that they have in terms of helping with more motivational interviewing. So we added a lot more MI into it, and then a lot of acceptance and commitment therapy. So these are all concepts from that therapy. So these are all evidence-based strategies that are in the invitation to change. So here's our model here. So it goes around a wheel. We have this, and I'm going to share a workbook with you at the end. So this is all things that you can use in your practice. You can share with family members. These are the sections of it. So we've broken it into 3 parts, because like I said, one of the things we realized when we were trying to teach craft, which craft is really in the last section here, which is helping with action, communication tools and behavioral tools. We realized that family members, we really have to help them put a lot of the shame and stigma down in order to be willing to approach learning new skills themselves. So the helping with understanding is a big part of that. So we've got 3 parts in there, and then we've got helping with awareness. So craft has a big self-awareness piece, but we never felt, it doesn't have a self-awareness, it has self-care piece to it. Just like al-anon, it's take care of yourself. That's an important part of helping. But we really wanted to add, you got to increase your own awareness of your emotional state. And we really wanted to add a lot more compassion, because compassion both for the family member and the person with the substance use problem is pretty key to being able to make changes over the long haul. So those are the new parts that we added in on top of craft. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about each section. So the first section is something we call behaviors make sense, right? These are some of the things that family members often come in saying. You've probably all heard these things. He's using because an addict, that's what addicts do. She's just self-destructive. He's manipulative. Using drugs is crazy. So these are all things that family members walk in the door saying. We hear it in our culture. But notice these statements probably don't make you want to step towards the person with the problem, right? They're pretty hopeless. They're really an indicator that you should step away. So what we try to help them realize, so every part of this is about getting a new perspective so that you can help effectively, is to realize that your loved one's behavior makes sense in some ways. People do not use substances because they're crazy. They do not use substances because they're bad, horrible people. They use substances because they work in some way for them. They get something that is reinforcing. And if we can step back and be curious about that, if we can be curious, why is this person going towards this substance? What are they getting out of it? We can do all sorts of stuff with that information, which I'm going to tell you about in a second. But the first part is to just understand it. So we try to help family members, gain some perspective, right? So if I told you I could help you mellow out, I could reduce your physical pain, I could help you socialize, I could make you funny, I could give you a good sleep. If I could give you everything on this list, would you want that? Most people say, yeah, there's a lot of things on this list that are really great. And you could just give me a pill and give me this, I'd take it, right? As many of you might guess, a lot of these things are exactly what substances give. So one of the things we try to help family members realize is like, is there anything on this list that is crazy? Is there anything on this list that is amoral, unacceptable to want as a human? These are all just normal human wishes, right? So when you kind of realize like, oh, substances actually do these things, and substances are even more powerful because they're actually chemically reinforcing and impact our brains. Those are pretty powerful reinforcers. So if we're going to compete with these things that your loved one gets from substances, we've got to really help you respect that these are important. They matter to your loved one. And by understanding them, you can do a lot of things. You can start to realize your loved one's not using substances to torture you. They're using substances because they're getting something out of it. You can be curious about that, which, like I said, may cause you to step towards your loved one instead of away. It's going to increase empathy because when we have understanding, we actually might have some more compassion and willingness to collaborate. And the last point here is the most important, which is, well, it's not the most important, but it's one of the most important, which is it allows you to kind of think, okay, if my loved one is if they're managing their social anxiety and managing all of their social interactions because pot makes them less anxious, how can I help my loved one with their anxiety, with their social anxiety? You know, what can I do? What things can I put in place that might be helpful to make social interactions easier, put them in front of different people, you know, whatever. So it allows the loved one to start to think creatively about how to potentially help their loved one solve the problem. Which in turn, when you have more empathy and willingness to collaborate, can really have a positive impact on the person with the problem. It really can create a platform, and we'll talk about this in a second, where they're actually motivated to talk about what they're doing and why they're doing it, instead of just going underground and trying to hide everything. Or denying and minimizing it, right? So having some of this awareness can actually open up the relationship. And most of the time when people come into treatment, the relationships by that point are pretty fraught and full of conflict. So a lot of these helping with understanding parts of this can just help people shift the overall dynamic because it's just going to change communication profoundly. So then the next part of this in the helping with understanding is one size doesn't fit all. So I see all those nice little feet and different pairs of shoes. Not everybody likes the same pair of shoes, and not every addict is the same. So again, these are the black and white things that we hear all the time out in the world. You're a codependent, he's got an addictive personality, got to hit rock bottom, you got to go to an al-anon. So substance use problems make people nervous. We want to fix it. We want to give people like, here's the answer if you just do this. And again, these black and white suggestions can be pretty problematic for the person receiving them. So what we try to help family members realize is that behaviors are so complex. Every single person with a substance use problem is different than the person next to them. They developed the problem for different reasons, and they're going to get out of it in different ways. So we really have to respect that and really encourage the family to slow down and think about what's going to work for your family, what's going to work for your loved one, you know, and giving people multiple options instead of just one option is really effective, turns out, in getting people to pick a path. So again, this just increases motivation. It increases the ability to collaborate and talk about options instead of just saying, you got to go to rehab, and if you don't go to rehab, that's it. Well, your loved one might have to go to rehab, and that might be a really good option. But if you're going to get a no, and that causes a fracture in your relationship, maybe there's a bunch of other things we can help you do that may get your loved one to rehab at some point, if that's in fact what they need and want. But keep you connected in the process as you try to get your loved one to the right treatment support. And some people will never again seek treatment. So what in your community will your loved one find beneficial to make the changes? You know, are there resources outside of treatment, support groups, community centers, places of worship, people in the community that they would relate to or possibly connect with? So these are just some of the questions that we encourage loved ones to start feeling like they can ask. And really thinking about themselves and what they can support, and you know, just considering all options. The next one is ambivalence is normal. This is a big one. You know, as a treatment provider, we're swimming in dealing with ambivalence all the time, right? So I assume everybody understands about ambivalence. people really don't. And when you empower family members to really understand that ambivalence is completely normal, we humans are filled with it all the time. Most of us have ambivalence about something just about every day. And if you can kind of normalize that as it applies to substance use, again, you can lower the temperature, you can lower the conflict in relationships because people just have more understanding of what's actually going on. So these are some of the common reactions. He's a liar. He's not serious. He told me he was going to stop using, and here he is using again. She's in denial. Again, lots of black and white statements. Turns out, like I said, ambivalence is completely normal. We do not have a delete button in our heads. As much as we wish we did, we can't just delete something we don't want to do. It's in our memory bank, it's in our learning history. And so we've got to put new behaviors on top of it, right? You can't just cut something out. You actually have to learn a bunch of stuff. And while you're learning that stuff, the old behavior still works. So during tough moments or periods of time where your loved one doesn't actually know how to cope with whatever it is they're facing, that old pathway is going to be very appealing. And so we can help loved ones really start to see that for what it is, and try to reduce some of the common reactions we all have to ambivalence, which is we want to talk people out of their ambivalence. We want to confront it. We want to educate them. And as many of you know, those are not some of the most effective ways to get somebody talking who's ambivalent. So these are some of the ways that understanding ambivalence can really help loved ones. It helps them stay engaged. It helps them, again, not take things personally, and can help them learn communication skills, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute, that can actually impact their loved one when they're ambivalent. So we can, I say to people all the time, I can make you defensive. I can make you want to do the exact opposite of what I'm telling you to do, or I can engage you and say things and work with you in a way that's motivational, and you're going to be more inclined to move forward instead of kind of get stuck. So we're teaching family members those strategies. And I think this is one of the ones that's most helpful for a lot of family members, is to go back to that list of all the things that the person gets from using, right? All these positives. Sure, there's a whole list of negatives over here, right? But the positives don't erase the negatives, and the negatives don't erase those positives. So family members are often really focused on all the horrible things that are coming out of their loved one's substance use. Yes, there's a lot of horrible things, and those horrible things don't erase the positives. And then when you add, so here's all those positives, and I can't delete that. I can't just forget that. It works in this way. So I have to learn some new things. All the things on this side, so now all this list on the right, all these new things, they don't work right away, right? Like, I don't know if any of you guys know how to meditate or have practiced meditating or picked up a new hobby. In the beginning, you suck at it, right? It doesn't work. It works sometimes. It's not that much fun. You feel awkward. So when we're asking somebody to change, we're asking them to engage in a bunch of behaviors that they're unfamiliar with, and are not going to be so positive and reinforcing. And we're asking them to give up a bunch of stuff. So as a family member or as a support system, we've got to have a lot of compassion for that and find ways to really reinforce all the things on that right-hand column over here, the things that we're hoping that they're going to engage in that compete with the substance use. But this is where family members can really have a positive impact, is by putting a lot of weight behind reinforcing other things. So the next section, so that's all the understanding. And I will say to you, I talk about this stuff all day long. And when I talk to family members, I kind of approach it sometimes of like, oh, sure, you know all this stuff, right? Every single time I go through these sections, I'm so surprised and grateful that we're putting this information in front of them, because they're like, oh, that's so helpful. I hadn't understood it in that way. So don't discount how impactful that understanding section can be. Then you've got the self-awareness section, which is really where we turn the attention to them, because a lot of family members are just understandably on their last nerve. They're overwhelmed, they're frightened, they're mad, and they're pretty emotionally overwrought. So these are a lot of the things that family members will come in and say, I'm numb, I'm mad all the time, I'm depressed. So we really try to spend a lot of the model is about shifting and increasing their own self-awareness, because you can't use skills so effectively when you're completely emotional, right? It's actually hard to do. So one of the things that we really want to help people become aware of is that, like, when they're not taking care of themselves, they'll end up having emotional reactions like shutting down, yelling, pushing away, like all the things that kind of are counter to being potentially helpful or understandable, but not so effective in getting their loved one to move forward. So there's a lot about how to take care of yourself. And then we really try to anchor them in their values. Like, what kind of parent do you want to be? What kind of loved one do you want to be? What makes you feel good about yourself? And can you anchor yourself in that as ways to drive what you're doing with your loved one? So there's a fair amount of values work in it. And again, this is all just about helping them slow down and being able to be strategic instead of reactive, giving them permission to step away and cool off, which is very different than, family members get a lot of distance with love kind of messaging. When you dig in there and unpack that, they often don't really know what that means or how it applies to their family. But giving them very concrete skills of like, yeah, sometimes you actually really do have to walk away for a while and cool yourself off, because you're going to lose your cool. You're not going to be able to use your communication skills. So we're really empowering them to listen to their emotions and stay connected to themselves while they're trying to support their loved one. There's a section on willingness, which is also pretty impactful, because we're trying to help them understand their pain a little bit, or a lot actually. Some people are literally like, it's too painful. I can't stay connected. I'm too scared. I'm too mad. I don't want my loved one to die. I don't want my loved one to get hurt. And I'm in massive pain myself. So how do I stay connected to myself? So those are the things on the left-hand circle here, which is what matters to me. And what are all the things that come along with trying to help my loved one? What are all the painful things that I'm experiencing? And this next slide kind of shows what family members often tell us, which is, I love my loved one. I want our relationship to be collaborative, kind. I want to be connected. And at the same time, I'm full of heartbreak and hopelessness and feel terrible. Turns out you can't have one without the other, right? So part of what we are trying to do is help loved ones really notice when they're wanting that painful side to go away. Because when we're trying to cut out pain, we do all sorts of things. We try to control the other person. We try to control ourselves, like shutting down, right? So to just notice that and be able to decide in any given moment, and am I willing to engage right now? And if I'm not, that's okay. How can I take care of myself? And what's my next goal in terms of engagement? And one of our parent coaches, and this is a slightly complex thing for me to explain in 2 minutes, but one of the parent coaches said that this section really helped her change. Willingness changes meaningless suffering into meaningful suffering, which you're suffering as a parent if your child is unwell. There's no way to escape that suffering, but if you can add some meaning to it, and if you can infuse some hope into I'm doing things that can potentially help both of us, that can really, really empower a parent to keep going. And then this last section is really where most I almost skipped the most important part, which is self-compassion. So this is not in craft, and we added it because it's just so important for loved ones and for people with substance use problems. Really having compassion for yourself in the change process is pretty crucial, and it's really the gas in your tank, right? If you're driving down the road and you're on a long journey, you need to keep your gas tank filled up. And self-compassion is, I think, pretty critical. And it's very different than self-care, right? I think of self-care as the external stuff we do. I'm going to take a bubble bath. I'm going to, go for a walk, whatever. Those are things that we can do on the outside. Self-compassion is really figuring out how to treat yourself kindly and compassionately as you try to change, because we're trying to teach family members new skills. Their loved one is trying to learn new skills. And as human beings, we screw up all the time when we're learning new things. And if you react to that with anger, if you react to that with shame, if you react to that I'm going to give up, the change process is going to be very difficult. So what we're trying to do is really help people put a lot more compassion into the change process for everybody involved. And we do a lot of exercises with them to try to become in touch with that. So this last section is the helping with action part. And like I said, this is really where most parents want to jump right in. They just want to take action, right? One of the things we try to do is really slow them down and think, okay, what kind, yeah, you might want to rush in fast, and get this all wrapped up neat and tidy quick. But odds are you're going to be looking like the left-hand picture of this slide, which is smashing the hammer on the glass, right? What we want to try to do is help you develop skills that will have more of a ripple effect for your child and for your whole family. Because what we hear a lot is how these strategies really help the significant other in their life in general. Like it just helps them all the way around. And so this has two sections, which is communication tools and behavioral tools. The communication tools are where a lot of motivational interviewing are. We really give people a lot of skills about how to engage in conversations in a way to keep conversations productive and moving forward, right? We do all sorts of things that shut conversations down. And I think that's especially true when we're frightened or we're angry, right? So this section is full of a lot of strategies to help family members and parents in particular help their kid keep talking. And this is especially important kind of through young adult teenage years when teenagers don't want to talk. And you compound that with substance use and it's even more problematic. So we really try to teach them skills to just change so many aspects of their relationships. You can get more information from your child. If you're getting more information, you've got more ways to help because you've got all sorts of stuff in there that you can learn from. And then going back to those behaviors, we don't do stuff multiple times in a row unless it's getting reinforced in some way. We're getting something out of it, right? So we try to help them understand the concept of positive reinforcement, which is really the significant part of what Craft brought. It's a whole section on positive reinforcement, which is growing and strengthening and supporting positive behaviors and limiting the using behaviors or unhealthy behaviors that you're trying to reduce. And the ways that you go about that are allowing for natural consequences, limit setting, and stepping away. And so the reinforcement is like, so one of the examples I give is if your loved one comes home sober and you greet them at the door with, "I'm so glad you're home. Let's sit down and have dinner." That loved one's going to be like, "Oh, coming home sober is pretty cool. Maybe I'll do that again," right? If my loved one comes home sober and I meet them at the door and I'm pissed off about the 5 things that they did last week, and that's what I greet them with, they're not going to feel like coming home sober is worth it. In fact, they might walk into their bedroom and go get high, right? So this isn't about blaming the person here in the middle for having understandable upset feelings about all the stuff that happened the week before. It's all about timing, right? That you're trying to reinforce, you're coming home sober. I want to reinforce that. I want that to happen again. So what as a loved one, can I do that will increase those odds? So it's just helping them, again, think strategically. And what do I want to support? Like going back to that list of, these are all the things my loved one could learn potentially, or things that I can support that might compete with their substance use. So what can I do to reinforce that? And then the consequences. Naturally occurring consequences are all the things that just naturally come out of someone's substance use, right? So getting in trouble with a teacher at school for not showing up for late for a job, having your boss be upset with you. Those are natural consequences. And again, this is a deep section that I'm just kind of skipping over here. But again, going back to that self-awareness, they come in with a negative behavior, they walk in the door high. Your response is, "I'm gonna step away right now. I'm gonna not engage with you." Their negative behavior is still there, but it's not bigger, right? And this slide did get actually a little screwed up. This part right here, the natural consequences should go up at the top. Because if my loved one walks in high and I rage at them, they're just gonna get worse. And so it's like, we want to help loved ones really be strategic in how they respond to negative behaviors. And this whole section is full of ways to do that, including stepping away, because sometimes you really do need to do that. And then the last section is all about practice, because this is a real behavioral strategy. And when somebody's struggling with a substance use problem, they're going to have to practice being sober. They're going to have to practice not using substances. So we really try to help family members understand that practice is a big part of the change process, both for their loved one, who they're hoping will change, and for themselves, right? We're trying to teach them new communication skills. They're going to screw it up sometimes. They're going to have good intentions of, like, I'm going to try to have a rich and productive conversation, and they're going to go lose their cool and yell at their kid, right? So being able to tolerate that, again, we all kind of suck at new stuff. That's just normal. And if we can stick with it and practice and bring some compassion to the change process, we're going to be able to stick with it over the long haul. And that's where really profound change can happen. So I'm just looking at the time. I think I managed to say just about everything in 20 minutes. So this is, so this link down at the bottom, invitationtochange.com, that will take you to this workbook. So we have a book coming out in July that is the full, it's by New Harbinger, which is the full invitation to change approach. But we've created this little short guide. We're calling it the short stack. And there's sessions on all of the stuff I just covered, and it's free. You can purchase it, I think, for $10 or something like that. How do I stop sharing my screen? $10, which goes towards a donation to the foundation, or you can download all the sessions for free. So you can also do that. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to catch up on all those chats, or you can tell me what the most important thing is after.
I can navigate the chat for you
Okay.
a little bit, Carrie. Thank you so much. That was
Some serious speed talking. So sorry, that was a serious drive through of a lot of content.
definitely a lot of content, and also timely. You know, I want to just leave space and put it out there that, you know, recently we've seen, I think in the Times was yesterday, some staggering statistics about drug overdoses, and, you know, that they are just, I mean, they've surpassed gun violence, and the statistics are scary and also not surprising. I think so. This conversation is so timely. How do we reach the people that are never going to walk in the door? That's such an important way of looking at how we can combat this problem that is killing so many people. So I'm just going to start going through some of the questions. Paul asked, I also want to say thank you to Brittany in the chat, who was so vulnerable and shared their experience. It's super helpful to be able to learn from our own and other people's personal experiences. So thank you for sharing that. Paul asked about what if addiction is something like shopping or eating? You know, I guess, how does this model apply? Does it apply, et cetera?
I think it does, you know, because the little dopamine hit that somebody gets from shopping and eating, I mean, again, it's reinforcing, it's doing something for them, right? So a lot of the, you know, I mean, the things that may compete with behavior may be different. I think there's probably a ton of overlap, and you see it with substance use all the time. Like, people will put substances down and something else will pop up, you know, so I think a lot of the strategies apply. Somebody, is ITC essentially an expansion of the 20-minute guide? Yes. If you download the new ITC workbook, basically all of the 20-minute guide is in there with all of these other, we've expanded the willingness and the self-compassion and the understanding section. So it's the latest version of that. Catherine, do you have any desire to share your wisdom around the ITC? Catherine's a mom who's used a lot of it.
Sure. So I started using this when my daughter was 15 or 16. She had multiple substance use disorders and a lot of co-occurring disorders. And I had been through 12-step. I had been through CBT. We had taken her to McLean Hospital and put her in outpatient borderline personality disorder treatment. And it wasn't working. And then we found this. So the pragmatism of this, that basic message of behaviors make sense, incontrovertibly true, incontrovertibly true. And applying this kindness protocol, the craft, the motivational interviewing, the acceptance and commitment therapy, when you can remember to do it, and it does, it takes practice. It took me like 2 years to start hitting it right repeatedly, to get out of my own reactivity, to get out of my own shame and stigma and loss, and but it works. And when I train other parents, they come back to me and they report the same thing. It works. It's just about applying it. And it works with food. It works with substances. It works with gaming. It works with people who have shopping disorders. You can apply it to pretty much any behavioral disorder. And what it takes and what they hammer on at the Center for Motivation and Change is repeated practice. It takes a multiplicity of applications, and sometimes it works right away and sometimes it doesn't work at all, and your family member mocks your behavior and says, how come you're so nice all of a sudden? I mean, you get punched in the head a few times in the beginning because your loved one is not used to you behaving this way. So until you change and can hold that consistency, it makes them uncomfortable because they're used to you behaving the other way. But I mean it, when you can do it, it's like gold. It's extraordinary. And it saved my daughter's life, and in saving her life, it saved my life, because I can't live on a planet that kid doesn't live on. That's just me, but it's true.
I can imagine why that would be true. This is an awesome kid. And what Catherine just said, though, I think is super important, which is, when parents get the distance yourself with love or use tough love, I think it just goes, that means so many different things. And people are typically so confused by what the heck that stuff means. And people throw it around all the time, right? I've never met a parent who wants to be disconnected from their kid. They're desperate to be connected to their kid, and they're desperate for their kid to be doing well. So to be able to kind of give people strategies, tough love makes love tough. Yes, it does. But also, like, parents know, like stuff's not working, right? Like there are things that are not working in my relationship. My kid is struggling. My kid is engaging in behaviors that are frightening and upsetting and enraging to me, right? So all those feelings are understandable. And if we can help give you those skills, like Catherine said, like I can practice, they incrementally start to change my relationship. Over time, the change can be really profound, actually. But it's not a quick fix. Yes, we are using the invitation to change. So we just, so the nonprofit, we spent the last year finishing these, the book and the workbook, and then we trained a group in Virginia and Oklahoma, and they have started community groups using this content. And we just did a recovery coach training this last weekend, and hopefully those several people in that group are going to be starting community groups. So the mission this year is to spread this. So if you want to start a community group, go to the cmcffc.org. Gab can put it in the chat, and sign up for our newsletter, and we'll alert you to new trainings. We're going to be doing a training once a quarter. So you can get trained, become a part of we can train you to start a community group, and then you can get supervision with us to start, because I really want like free community groups out in the world. I would like an ITC group next to an al-anon group, and people get to pick and go to whatever. And so, like, a lot of people do both. The messaging can be helpful. Both can be helpful. But I think that's our mission. So if anybody here wants to participate in that and wants to bring this nice content to your community, please reach out to us. We're game.
Carrie, I had a question that came in. I think it came to me in a direct message by mistake, I think. But the question is, can you speak more about enabling? How do you create a balance between making parents not beat themselves up about enabling, but also set healthy limits with their children?
Yeah, so it's for us, it's really kind of like, so when you kind of come from a behavioral perspective, enabling, when you say like you're enabling, parents can hear that as like, you should do nothing, don't do anything, right? Versus being able to, again, strategically be like, okay, what are the positive, healthy behaviors that I want to support and what, I want to engage with? And what are the behaviors that I actually need to have some consequences, my loved one to have some naturally occurring consequences? This isn't necessarily applicable for young adults, but I use it as an example all the time, which is I worked with a spouse. Her loved one was drinking himself to sleep in his armchair every night, right? And so she would come down at 1 o'clock in the morning and he'd be surrounded by beer cans and passed out in his armchair. She'd pick up the beer cans, she'd go clean him up, she'd get him into bed. He'd wake up in the morning in bed, cozy, mess clean, right? She was in a rage all the time and they'd get in a fight every morning and he was constantly telling her what a nightmare she was, right? She started, so that the enabling was picking up his mess, right? And she was picking up his mess because she didn't want her kids to see their dad passed out in a chair. Understandable. His kids were teenagers, and she decided that that wasn't working. And so she left him in his rocking chair surrounded by beer cans, and the teenage kids came down and found him. That only had to happen twice, where he woke up in that chair surrounded by beer cans with his teenage son standing over him, being like, "What's up, Dad?" That happened twice and he stopped engaging that behavior. He stopped doing that. So the enabling was picking up his mess. So it's really helping people figure out like, what are the natural consequences that you're getting in the way of? And can you let those natural consequences have an impact on your loved one? So that they are like, oh, my substance use is actually not working. It's not that you're the nightmare. It's actually my substance use isn't working. It's not getting me what I want. So there's a lot in the model that helps them kind of distinguish those kind of things.
Thank you. We have 5 minutes, but I want to make sure that I give people a little bit break, but there's one more question that came in. If you could just address it quickly. View on harm reduction versus abstinence.
Harm reduction is one of the many steps that will get you to abstinence, right? And it's life-saving. And this model really is kind of a harm reduction model for family members because it's helping them realize like change can happen at any step of the way here. And if I get overly locked in on this can be the only goal, and I've got tons of conflict because this is what I believe can be the only goal, you're going to just have a bunch of conflict and you're not able to engage in healthy, constructive ways and move the conversation along. So if you can identify communication strategies, things that you're reinforcing, things that help motivate your, and like being curious, like, why does my loved one not want to be totally abstinent? There may be things about that. There may be things about abstinence that are really hard that they don't know how to manage. So can I do things that support that over time? So yes, harm reduction is life-saving, and there's lots of people on this planet who will never ever be abstinent and they can change their lives, and to not discount that. And then there's other people who really have to be abstinent or they'll die. So again, like every person with a problem is different. So we have to be able to engage with everyone. If we're gonna change things, we got to engage with everyone and meet them where they're at.
Thank you. Thank you so much. If there's follow-up questions, please feel free to email them after this presentation, and we will do our best to get you answers as quickly as possible. I know that sometimes you hear a presentation, then 3 days later you say, oh, I wish I would have asked this question. So if that happens, let us know, please.
Yeah.
And
Love to
thank
hear
you.
from you guys.
Yeah. So just to let everybody know, our next roundtable will be with Dr. Seth Mandel, and he will be speaking about benefits of integrative psychiatry for treating young adults. Super interesting conversation, looking at more holistic and naturopathic approaches to psychiatry. So we look forward to hopefully seeing some of you or all of you there next week. And thank you again, Dr. Wilkens, for this presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Happy holiday, everybody. Hope you get some time off. And thanks, Brittany and Catherine, for helping. And thanks to the dorm.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah,